My name is Carissa Meyer, and this is my final presentation for multidisciplinary studies. The multidisciplinary program is not where I ever saw myself ending up, but with adulthood striking early, when I finally did get a chance to finish my education, I valued a bachelor's degree in any form. That being said, my original plan of a fine arts degree wasn't going to happen, but that was when I learned about the MDS program. I had no idea what to expect, but was not disappointed by the way the MDS program and its professors worked together to provide a formulaic manner by which to evaluate something so ethereal and unpredictable as the future. Starting by understanding the foundations of the MDS outcomes in my own experiences, important ideas like the problem solving and effective thinking, taking into account others' differences, and how to communicate in every aspect seemed so obvious. But with other study, I've seen how much I'd never even thought of. In the program, I studied and appreciated variation of people and perspectives the world holds. These outcomes lay the foundation for recognizing and rebuilding over bad habits. The questions asked throughout the program have brought forth new answers to questions that I thought we just all had to figure out on our own. When I began applying those rules and guidances to the actual next physical plan towards my original goal of an art therapist's career, using the IDP plan and evaluation strategies in MDS 300, I realized there was no way fiscally that I could accomplish it in the way we'd hoped. It was the beginning of a lot of steps that helped ground my goals and give me perspective I hadn't acknowledged. It was unexpected but critical, and almost as unexpected and critical as my service learning job in the special education support rooms in a local elementary school as teacher. Yet again, reality had shifted my perspective on the preconceived notion of what being in an elementary school actually looked like these days as a job and what a special education facilitator really deals with every day. I'd put both aspects of the job on a weird pedestal for decades now between my family history with educators and my own decision to help those who struggle with developmental disability. My time in the study didn't just shift topics like how I think about myself in an interview or how my leadership skills might affect a singular hurdle, but the MDS completion to my degree, as I hope to walk across that graduation stage in just a few weeks, leaves me a very different person than the one that started the program just to complete her degrees a few semesters ago. It can't be argued that my focus on problem solving, effective writing, and ethical thinking are the MDS outcome goals that best encompass my mindset shift that affects everything from my future plans to my philosophical standpoint. These goals, in combination with the comparison of my perspective before and after our work together, makes looking at my IDP plan and how my real life experience with service learning in the field changed a lot about my perspectives and only strengthened others. Looking at the biggest changes by the outcome goals themselves, my greatest shift of mentality has been in the program goals of problem solving, effective writing, and ethical thinking. Problem solving is the first piece of the foundation that I needed to evaluate in my own growth and continue to work with others. The first learning and program outcome goal. Program solving is defined in the program as designing, evaluating, and implementing a strategy to answer an open-ended question or achieve a desired goal. When I began the MDS program, I was coming from a very difficult separation from a job where I'd questioned every word out of my mouth as something that maybe should have gone through a committee evaluation first. There was just no trust in myself, and certainly no trust in my ability to make a decision that I was willing to make out loud, let alone stand behind. Different types of communication and leadership are what I chose to focus on in finishing my MDS degree, knowing that my uncertainty and my problem solving and in turn my leadership were what I needed to be reminded of and honed. In my IDP, I ensured case studies in leadership, nonverbal communication, and foundations of leadership as pieces of what I would need to graduate, recognizing classes for the first time as an adult for the subject and potential lessons, rather than for my perception of which one will have the least homework. Each of these courses questioned and pushed my ideas of what success and failure was, something that I desperately needed at the time. A push of positive ideas, but also a push of ideas in a magnitude that I'd not been accustomed to in a long time. Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, the position I'd come from and the position of being placed in this nostalgic expectation of my own writing, especially academically, not a manual for a health record or a spreadsheet of clients and provider addresses. Writing coming from me, but also about me, is it was the point of the program where outcome 3 came into play very, very strongly about effective writing. While effective writing is defined loosely by the program as simply being able to communicate ideas effectively through writing, for me, that meant a lot more than understanding APA format or being able to put together a cohesive sentence. In my IDP, we spoke specifically about learning in leadership and communication, focused courses on communication itself, specifically writing. And it was something that I had struggled with substantially since a significant medical event. Um, and having just come out of another less severe episode rather recently at the time, I was genuinely concerned about my ability to put thoughts on paper at all. The fact that I was struggling with the act of written communication, especially from a personal perspective, was obvious. I would say there is still an immense amount of improvement I have to do, but interacting with my fellow students and having an opportunity to receive their feedback without the distraction of my own mind to get in the way, and to be able to be honest and open in a way about situations that I've not been able to approach in this manner or in a public forum in general at all, being able to acknowledge the impact of how these pasts influence everything and the goals set forth in my IDP, even in relation to the subject of effective writing, they're far and away covered. Ethical thinking, or the sixth tenet of the MDS program, was certainly not a highlight that I thought I'd be covering at the end of my college degree as a point of theoretical shift. It is defined by the program as reason about right and wrong in human conduct, including recognizing ethical issues, applying different ethical perspectives to ethical dilemmas, and considering the consequences of alternative actions. While I've only tried to follow these ideas and serve others through caregiving or administration at DBH, multiple levels of family care, even this is taken into account in my IDP. The eventuality that I may end up as a teacher, but have focus on therapy reflects in records from other classes too, like child development, multicultural arts from a teacher's perspective, and other educational classes for instructing kids. My goal, as defined in my first draft of the IDP, was to pursue art therapy, but I quickly discovered it would require a move to Phoenix, Arizona, another 3 full years of full-time school, and we would be hopeful and thankful for a salary that was equivalent to what I was making at the state of Idaho already. Even here, it was just enough for us to live comfortably, and that was without 2 separate student loans, a higher cost of living, and most importantly, more stress on our personal life and relationship. And this is where my perception of ethical thinking actually began to shift in a good way. I realized that even though art therapy had been a dream since I was a little girl, I would be doing nothing but good for others. There are just windows that close, but others that open. The core dream is still wishing to work with the challenged in art and in care, still had a chance, and a viable one, to test out as a teacher. A lot less training, a lot less student loans, a lot more forgiveness programs. I thought this was a great idea, and I could very well be credentialed by the fall through ISC. To test it out, and as well as part of my service learning project, I was able to attain a paraprofessional position at a local elementary school. and I worked there 3 months before medical complications uh, caused my resignation. But I do have to say that 3 months was more than enough for a picture of reality. The Hollywood effect is really strong when it comes to what special ed profession looks like and what schools look like. It was certainly the case in both classroom observer as well as the one trying to deliver the lesson. The system is so bent on budgets and on data analysis and all of the everything else to quantify what they're doing that the humanity's been sucked out of it until you get to the saints with their boots on the ground and they're hailing fire from all directions. It's the whole thing is a terrible creature, and it has every single person, every child, every teacher, every assistant, every parent, every piece of hope that's ever been tied into it, just desperately trying to make any kind of forward motion, but they're all chained to a backwards moving treadmill. While there were a few ethical gray spots that I did run into while serving in my time as a paraprofessional teacher, it wasn't until a situation where it became apparent that accountability was simply not something that could be enforced that I drew a line. It's one of those problems that's convenient because the finger can keep circling, and it can keep circling from school to district to parent to program, but it does not excuse where a weekly outcome is an alternate lockdown and having to barricade doors. And having to come up with alternate long-term lessons in case of a lockdown was a weekly preparation, just like any lesson plan. It was a typical day with one of my students, and he shouted out a curse word, then sent to the hallway, and when I came to bring him his homework, he ran. We took him into one of the safe modulars, and teacher and I barricaded the doors. I did not know what was going on, but I did get the whispered guidance to block the door. And that was simply it. Take the hits if they come, save the kids in the other room if that's what it takes. And behaviors happen, violence happens. That's why there's training for how to de-escalate verbally. That's why there's training how to de-escalate physically. But the resolution of the issue is what stopped me cold. It wasn't the behaviors. There was at the time another emergency situation happening with one of the SPED kids who had a higher instance of physical issues. So we were left to take care of our issue by ourselves. And after an hour and a half of not being able to reach the teacher who can usually make any kind of connection with this child, while we sat there receiving flow markers and cursing and being told who was in control, when it came down to it, I just wanted to understand how to hold them accountable. And after an hour and a half of that, it simply came down to a complete concedement. He wouldn't stop screaming and he wouldn't de-escalate until she had said, okay, you can walk back by yourself as long as you go to your classroom. I will call your teacher later to make sure you make it. And I was speechless. Without accountability, there's no reason they would see any differences but anything but something negative, something that makes them a special kid treatment, and they're ashamed of that anyway. Add into the power of finding the positive in it, the ability to manipulate, the purposeful boundary pushing, the fighting, stealing, cheating, derogatory terms, slinging, an incredible number of things ethically that are issues. However, they were never held accountable for them because of their status, and not many children were held accountable, unfortunately. It was not something that I could deal with ethically, because without that accountability and without that extra assistance, they were teaching them nothing and only sending them to the prisons with an even better understanding and an even better lesson taught in how to do those things like steal, fight, and cheat, because all they had was practice up until 18. the district themselves have made the decision to not disseminate the information about the Youth Empowerment Services Program, which will completely revamp children's mental health. It would require the districts to find a lot of people who don't want to take those jobs for a lot of very scary reasons, and probably account for a lot of stories and issues that they don't want to bring up. And unfortunately, I feel like that's why a lot of those people are struggling. It's true to turn the other cheek and karma will always return, but there had to be a reason why I continued to find myself on the losing side of this battle that is always fighting uphill. And I looked around my home as I was working diligently on more curriculum that would eventually be taken away because it was causing fights. And I looked around, but I didn't notice the clump of hair by the floor that my husband had done the dishes. I can truthfully say that every goal in my IDP, whether it's leadership, teaching, learning, or creating new enterprises, is still straight on, if not even better. The compass has just shifted. Before, my goals were centralized around this mentality of changing the world, that the change could be made by one, leading by example, but this is altruism that I'm willing to fully admit I may not have the endless patience for. This project has made me aware of the systemic challenges that I can admit I'm willing to devote the rest of my time on this earth to, but it's inspired me to use the same process to discover new roads based on being 100% in the goals that I can complete, so that I can give 100% and see changes in the lives of those around me, not just a half-finished pile of good intentions. The IDV plan and the helpfulness of creating a quantifiable and measurable number of steps and sacrifices with reliable and predictable outcomes, also creating the same sense of stability in subjects we've studied like leadership, body language, speaking to another. Knowing that there's so much science and knowledge behind it gives me hope that there will be the same support out there for the other challenges that I've come to find myself relearning. But if they are quantifiable and these things can be actively studied and improved, I can finally shed the weight in my heart and soul that those pieces of me that were so effective aren't dead and maybe even come back out with something better in the end, between the shadowy memories of who I was and the structural education I'm using to rebuild those same ideas. A lot of things have taken a 180-degree turn from the time I entered the MDS program to the time I've left it. I believe it's a testament to its importance and accomplishment more than anything. This degree and the steps that it's challenged me into thinking and accepting have taken me far past the form of a final paper that specifies the bones of human anatomy when I only had knowledge of a few of them when I entered. My end challenge is more than a fill-in-the-bubble sheet that might as well be done for as long as you attended class. This program, from its absolute definition and refocus on the very fabric of humanity is defined in the outcome goals, gives that cornerstone on which to build actual structure. A plan may have ended up looking a lot different than it did in my head, but certainly a million times better for both myself and those around me than the sandcastle I thought I wanted.